Okay. I'll try to be appropriately nerdy. And Mike Lozano, you were great, and I'll try to meet your nerdliness. So, what I was going to talk about today is some of the lessons learned operating multiple 100-watt HF stations in close proximity. What is that? Well, we went out to field day, and we always have a problem. So, why isn't my screen? There we go. So, in my true Andy Rooney voice and sarcastic, did you ever wonder, you've been out to things like field day and there's a lot of received noise. Maybe it's at your home when you've got a neighbor that's running a kilowatt and a half to his mega yagi and you're sitting next door. Maybe you've had that annoying CW guy that just keeps sending and sending and sending, and all you hear is popping. And you've sat there wondering, is he ever going to switch to another band? Why do I have this big headache from listening to all this crap? And one of the contest groups, the VHF contest group, they would always call over and go, "We're losing cues." I'm like, okay, but we all have to operate. So, and of course, I put on here the annoying CW guy, but you can see in the cartoon on the side, CW impresses the ladies. When did you ever think that would be the fact in ham radio? So, and why isn't my thing? Okay. So what I wanted to nerd out or geek out about is our field day. And I may not have these dates exactly correct, but about 2020, we were all operating, and I don't know if my mouse shows it. Okay, there's the bigger arrow. We clustered everything right in the central core of our site. And this is obviously an overhead view. Doesn't show the terrain well, but this is basically the peak of a hill here. Kind of the ridge line runs across this red line that's marked from the trailer over to west. And we had all of our antennas all there, and all we did was, it was kind of like, I felt like I was sitting in a rowing cruise shell and I had power speedboats in the lanes next to me. We just had noise everywhere. And that's when I was thinking to myself, will they ever switch to another band? So in 2022, I think it was 2022, we moved one of the bands to the top of the hill, or what we call the Stonehenge site, because somebody had put flags in a octagon. I don't know if it was 8-sided or 12-sided. They had little yard flags out there that they were obviously staking out and, I don't know, maybe going to put a gazebo. So we named it Stonehenge. And we're about 500 feet away. And the interference definitely was reduced. But when we aimed the antennas at each other, it was kind of like having two battleships with 16-inch guns targeting each other. When we got, in the line of sight there, we still had some problems. So we moved in 2023, we moved over to this other spot, and we were only 350 feet away, but we had a lot less interference. Why? We didn't like it because there were a lot of rocks in the ground that you could trip over. They weren't huge, but it just wasn't as easy to get to. And so we eventually, in 2024, moved back to Stonehenge up on the top of the hill. And oops, this thing. And it generally was okay because we improved some things. But we did have another tribander down in the main complex here. So we had two, one that was high up on the mast and one that was lower. And we had some issues. That lower tribander was used by FT8. And when the CW station up on the top of the hill here with Stonehenge was beaming east and the FT8 station was beaming west, we were back into our situation. So The picture on the right is actually from just a capture from my pan adapter. And you can see where I highlighted with the purple arrows. There is just broadband noise across the whole band for long periods. Well, we learned that, okay, checking my time. We were using really good radios on sideband and CW, but we used what we had on digital because we said, well, it'll be fine. It's digital. The protocol will handle all of this. Well, we learned that not all transmitters and receivers are alike. There is a difference between the high-end Yaesus, which are scoring on the Rob Sherwood scale, and I'm assuming you guys is anybody, I can't see the room, but shout out. Does anybody not know Rob Sherwood or those online, or maybe I should just mention he's brilliant. He has a receiver test facility. I don't know, it's somewhere north of me and east out in Weld County, I think. And he puts every radio he can find through the paces for sensitivity, selectivity, dynamic range, phase noise. The Yaesus, high-end Yaesus, do remarkably well. And if you want a really high-end radio at a reasonable price, the Yaesu FTDX10 is an excellent radio and much less expensive than the Elecraft that I use. I use an Elecraft K3 and I have a K4D. And I think when I saw a view of the audience, I believe Jerry Villauer is there, and he has a K4, so he knows what I mean about the K4 is just incredible, but it's like $7,000 loaded up, so it's an expensive radio. So the IC 7300 and 7000 that we were using, they're fine radios for home use. And this is maybe where I need to get into the Mike Lozano mantra for home use. But those transmitters do get dirty when they get hot, when they warm up. When you're constantly transmitting FT8, it starts to make noise across the entire band that's just devastating to sideband or CW when they're transmitting. And they're typically transmitting for 15 seconds at a time. So that just shuts us down. The receiver on the 7300 falls apart. So great radios. I own one. I own a 7300. I guess I also have a 7000, but they're just not meant for side-by-side operation. So everybody says 905. Okay. Will filters help? Well, if we look at the case of interference between bands, yes, bandpass filter will help. I've got the graphic on the right here that shows, and the two graphics, and I'll get into what these are. But so I got a couple of examples. If we're running on 40 meters and 20 meters, I think everybody knows what's the second harmonic of 40 meters. It's going to come out on 20 meters. Same thing, the third harmonic of 40 meters is going to come out on 10 meters. So these two filters on the right here, I'll move a window, are the particular, oops, you can't, come on. Okay. Okay. These are the particular brand that I'm liking right now. There's a lot of them out there. And if you have a different brand, and you don't have a network analyzer to do these plots, I can help you. But these are some by Hamation. They used to be sold by, I think, Array Solutions or KX0B, but now they're over under the name of Hamation. The Longmont Club actually has these exact filters. I pulled this off their webpage, but they have these exact filters. I've measured them and they work well. As you'll see, on the left is the expensive one, the EF, and on the right is the cheaper one, the CF. You can see the plots here of the left hand has very deep notches here on the adjacent. Come on, give me the little arrow, but I think you can see the red lines. Those two red lines is the upper and lower edge of the ham band there. So you can see 40 meters is not very wide when we're looking at a 30 megahertz to 6 megahertz, a 24 megahertz span. But there's a deep notch on the EF at the adjacent bands, whereas the less expensive filter has a little bit more like a bell shape of sorts. So yes, these filters are very effective for reducing crossband interference. But people say, well, we want to run 20 meter CW and 20 meter sideband. Will a bandpass filter help? And typically when I'll call down to the station I'm up at Stonehenge or at that remote spot, and I'll say, what band are you on? What's going on down there? And they're like, oh yeah, we're also on 20 meters and we'll put our filter in. Well, you can see in the right picture here, the 20 meter band is this purple, there we go, this purple line. And is the filter going to help? It's not. So what we need to do is have physical separation between the stations and put our antennas such that the main beam shooting out, coming off the antenna, is not aimed at the other. I put down here on the bottom, antennas should be placed at least 300 feet apart, what James Sizik and I jokingly call one Spinelli. You'll hear us occasionally at field day say, we're 1.5 Spinellis. What the heck is a Spinelli? Well, James has a friend, Gene Spinelli, I think his call is K5GS. He's a very experienced DXer. And he basically says, you got to be a little over 300 feet apart. So we named 300-foot increments as a Spinelli. So that's what's going to help. Even the expensive hemation, it's not going to help for within a band. So what did we do? Willem mentioned I sold a house. This is not the house I sold. This is my new house that I bought that I'm fixing up. And I call it the Alpha Delta Radio Ranch. It's 7 acres. You can these white lines are my property borders. So it goes a fair ways above here. So I haven't really explored the northern extremes. Little house, lots of outbuildings, got a big barn here right under the 300-foot mark. So that's a 30 by 100-foot barn to give you a scale. And I've got a hay barn and another barn that's about ready to fall down. So we decided to do winter field day up here. And we weren't doing winter field day to amass a big score. We weren't doing it to win. We were doing it to learn. And so we had key learning conditions of everybody that came up, one of which was everybody gets on the air, everybody makes more QSOs than they've ever made at a field day. We wanted you to be active, but we set up 2 stations, one right in my courtyard area or open area, right next to the building that we call the She Shed and Monty Hall. That building right above under Com Trailer has 3 doors, door number 1, 2, and 3. So we jokingly call it Monty Hall. So we put the Com Trailer there, we put the QRV3 there, and we had a tribander, one of the A3Ss we use at field day with a 40-meter kit on it, up at 50-some feet. And that was one of our main stations. We cabled that directly. I think that one was on the K4D. And then we went 300 feet away, one Spinelli. We had in the lower corner here, we had the QRV2 with another identical tribander. And we had the solar bunkhouse, so we could power it legally by the field day rules. And so we put that there. And we had 2 tribanders that would normally be aimed to the southwest or the northeast. You either want to beam the East Coast or beam the West Coast from Colorado on 40, 20, 15, and 10. But the ends of the elements, the nulls, were pointed at each other. We then said, and we had a digital station, which was an IC 7300 that we were running a little bit less power, at least I think. Hold on, it's just telling me, did I lose my audio? Somebody
No,
online, do I still have audio?
no, you sound fine.
Okay, I just got this little window that my AirPods had come online, and I'm like, they're not in my head. That's going to be a problem. So we had no interstation interference, and I think Mark Skelton, who's behind the cameras there and the equipment, was mostly running the digital station with Kevin Boog's help. And I think they were running a little bit less than 100 watts, but we put the two big guns on and no interference. So what does all this mean? Well, there's another piece, and I'm just keeping time. I think I'll be right on time here. So we ran another experiment of using this HF triplexer. These are available off the shelf. You could build one. They let multiple HF radios operate. Obviously, the HF radios have to be on different band. Pay attention to this middle bullet point here. If you use one of these, you must add these on the right. It is not optional. You don't add the additional filters, your HF radio is dead. As a friend of mine once did on a traveling wave tube, he said, do not exceed 15 milliamps helix current. Greater than, tube dead, big dollars. Don't break. So don't break your new HF radio by not putting those on. I can't stress that enough. These triplexers and these bandpass filters will take, they say 200 watts. We were running them at 100 watts. And before I connected, you can see the test setup that we have here. I put my brand new K4D and my existing K3 on two of the ports. Everybody has their mantra. One of mine is, just because two connectors fit together doesn't mean they were intended to have you connect them together. Before I connected these radios to they're SO239 HF connectors, but I swept all of this on my network analyzer to verify we've got enough isolation and we wouldn't blow up a brand new radio. I would be crying right now if I did. So bottom line is we couldn't even tell the other guy was there. So here at the bottom, I don't think Maxwell's in the room with us and online. So he told me about these a few years back. I thought he was crazy. I was like, no way, John. I'm not hooking my expensive HF radio to this. You are insane. You are a fool. Well, please don't tell him I said this, but he was right. And even though I hate to admit it, Maxwell was right. So, but that secret's amongst us. So the final is, and I guess I'm staying on time. I also want to build a new antenna for 80 meters for field day. So I was thumbing through an ARRL handbook, not the antenna book, the handbook that I picked up at a event similar to the RM Ham Swap Fest coming up tomorrow at the Adams County Fairgrounds. Doors open at, I believe, 8 a.m., 8:30, sometime in the morning, and it'll be a great time. So pardon the shameless plug. And I came across an antenna section and they were talking about half-wave slopers. Now, I didn't have time to make my own graphics, so I stole it from hamradiosecrets.com, so I'll give them credit. But they basically put exactly what is in the ARRL handbook in their graphic. So people have probably used a sloper. It's basically a dipole set to a 45-degree angle. And it's directional in the direction that it's pointed. It has some directivity. It's not a lot. We're talking 80 meters here. So, and these antennas are low to the ground. But the handbook also talks about it wants a capacitive top hat. Well, we have a capacitance top hat on the top of the QRV. It's called a tribander. That's a big metal capacitance hat that's DC grounded to the mast. So what I'm working on now is putting maybe 2 sloper antennas. You could conceivably do 4 slopers off the mast, north, south, east, and west, or maybe rotate them pi over 4 so that they're aimed to New England, Los Angeles. There's one then on probably Seattle and another one on Florida, and just switch to the antenna and you've got a little bit of gain, directivity such that perhaps another band, another radio can run 80 meters CW or 75 meters CW while we're running 80 meter CW up on the top, sideband to CW. That's what I meant. So I'm experimenting with this, and I guess that's my last slide. And I'm showing, I think my time is up. I hope this was nerdy enough, but this is what we were doing and we've learned. And I hope that we will apply this at Field Day 2025, which is the 4th full weekend of June. I don't have the date handy. Rocky Mountain Ham has an incredible time up there in Jefferson, up at, if I'm still projecting at this property. And in my next talk, since Willem wanted some extra things, I'm going to talk about how do we move these things from these areas such that we've got a little bit more separation and we don't have interference. So I don't know if there's any questions or you guys are eyeing over the power rings that Willem brought, the donuts in the corner. So I will stop the share.
So tell
Any
me
questions?
tell me more about that triplexer. Does it contain all of the filtering between the bands? What additional band filtering do you need, and how do you actually set that up? Does the band filter go between the triplexer and the radio, or how does that all come together?
Yeah, I guess I probably should have put that on my slide, but these purple arrows, and Willem, I'm going for bonus points on the final exam for quality and effective use of purple. So just so you know, when you're grading these presentations. But yes, you would insert one of those, these Hamation filters right in this line here. So we put a 20 meter in here, a 15 and a 10. And I actually did that. Oops. Can't touch the magic mouse, otherwise it advances. I actually did that for Winter Field Day. And this is an international radio triplexer. And I'm going to look and see what there is available today. One of my Elmers, we were talking about Gene, one of James's Elmers. One of my Elmers is a gentleman named Fred. His call sign's K2 Tango Radio. And thankfully, he's getting older, but he's still with us and he's still teaching and experimenting. Just a great, great guy. And John Maxwell is sending me... He's listening. He says, thank you for admitting it. Okay, Maxwell was right. But I'll be right the next time. And I'm modest too. So Fred has a saying, if you can afford it, buy it. If you can't afford it, build it. So these are affordable. And in today's dollars, I would just buy one of these. By the time I get a case, connectors, and do all the work, I have less time than I have money right now. But for really complicated things, Fred built the equivalent of these and the bandpass filters to be able to handle 1500 watts because he used to have an HF multi-multi. station where we'd be on all HF bands and a DX contest at the same time, assuming they were all open. But so yes, we would use one of these, and I'm thinking for our field day next year, we try to get one or two of these and hook them up to the two tri-banders, and we could run like 20-meter sideband and 15-meter FT8 or 10-meter FT8, and we just have to come up with the right connection strategy in the trailer. And same thing on the other tri-bander that's 1.5 Spinellis away. We could do the same thing, but we need to have remote radios out by those transmitters. But that's the second talk. I'll leave you to tease you to that. Any other questions? Did that answer the question, Willem?
Yeah, I'm just amazed that you can actually, run a 100-watt radio into, essentially just a little bit of a filter, and basically share the Yagi up on the top of the QRV. I thought there would be a massive descent.
Well, and that's why I thought Maxwell was crazy. But I have a deep, intimate, caring relationship with my network analyzer. It's never lied to me, and it never steers me wrong. And I look at this filter, and this is the 20-meter, and these are available on the Hamation website, to give them credit. They have filters for 160 through 10, and they show the patterns. But if we're on 20 meters, the isolation to 15 meters is greater than 60 dB with just this filter. And you can see on the bottom is the SWR, or the return loss curve. I guess this is SWR, 1 to 1 to 2 to 1 across the band. So I've got 60 some dB with this filter. Then I go into the here, I'll just switch to the slide. I've got the other one here, but you look across from 15 meters to 20 meters is another 32 dB. So it's really more than 60. So it's probably, closer to, well, by the time we're done, 70, we're over 100 dB right there. And then we're on different bands. This is enough. It was enough that I trusted my K4D that had less than an hour of operating time on it. Jerry's probably in the room there as a fellow owner of one, cringing a little bit, but it's still working. So